Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
You guys brought up NSAM 263 and 73 because John and Greg, you guys did great work on Vietnam. And John, you talked about in the Oliver movie, you talked about McGeorge Bundy showing him NSAM 273 in that last paragraph that was crossed out by Bundy. And you said that Johnson told him to do that. When you asked him, he said Johnson told him to do that. And Greg, in your fine articles, you know, the one LBJ, right? 73, I'm talking about 273. Yeah. And then Greg, in your articles on LBJ in Vietnam, the one LBJ's War, I think it was called, or something.
Yes.
And fantastic article. You talked about how opening the door to the possibility of who was 273 actually written for, because it was written the day before, on the 21st, day before the assassination. So was that written for Kennedy or for Johnson? And we know the implications if it was written for Johnson. So my question to John and Greg is, it was written by, you know, McGeorge Bundy, Kennedy's national security advisor. Do you two feel that he had pre-knowledge to this plot to kill Kennedy?
Well, I absolutely do. I mean, the Honolulu conference, again, ostensibly, was supposed to be discussion of Vietnam policy. Well, what do we know on November 21st about Vietnam policy? It was the policy of the United States at that point to withdraw everybody from Vietnam. That's the policy. It was set on, what was it, October 10th, when NSAM 2, right? 6 weeks earlier.
Right.
The policy of the nation.
All U.S. personnel out by 65.
Right. So that's the policy. That's what they were supposed to be talking about in Honolulu. How to accomplish this? What does this mean? How do we do it? How do we do it without, you know, destroying the country on the way? I mean, whatever logistics they need to talk about, that's what allegedly they were supposed to be doing. How they came to the conclusion that they thought that JFK, not being consulted, remember, because they were in Honolulu, he was in Texas on a whirlwind trip. There's no way that they had meaningful conversation. Maybe somebody called them on the phone, but you know, you don't change this kind of policy over a phone call. So I don't know how anybody, including George Bundy, thought that Kennedy was going to reverse this pretty extreme policy of complete withdrawal from Vietnam and reverse it into, and I don't have it in front of me, but the wording of 273 is something about, it is, you know, the primary goal or object of the U.S. government to support South Vietnam. Well, that was at that point, that was not the policy of the government. So I don't see how, I can't reconcile how they thought they were going to fly back to Washington and go, look, we came up with this one. Would you sign it? It's the opposite of what you just said, but we think you should change your mind. You know, that just really I have trouble with that, you know. And we know this was roughly the evening when the draft was done, or even into the night, you know, and Kennedy was dead, you know, 30 hours later or something. I mean, and not even 30, 12 hours, you know.
And John, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I can answer this question because I talked to McGeorge Bundy about it and when it was done and why it was done. With respect to NSAM 273, so McGeorge Bundy, I asked him about it, you know, and about 273, and he said, I said, you were, you knew all about that, didn't you? And he said, no, I didn't even go. And I said, now, wait a minute. Yes, you did. You just can't remember. And as a lot of people were in a tizzy up here when Kennedy died. It's possible. He was his national security advisor. Anyway, I said, unfortunately, I have your version of it. And he said, well, you send it to me right away. And I said, sure. So I sent it to him. He called me back the next day. He said, absolutely. That's me. That's my handwriting on everything. Okay. Everything in here. And I said, okay. Now it's a NSAM 273 is pretty long. It's several pages. And there were a lot of things in it, but only one thing really pertains to whether we can go to war or stay with the advisor thing. And that's paragraph number 7. And in the initial, before Kennedy died, while he was still alive, when George Bundy, which I think he's anticipating that his president's still going to be there, because he puts a paragraph together that Kennedy could have, in fact, said okay. And what he says is, in this paragraph of NSAM 273 Part 1 is that action against North Vietnam and all that should be done by the additional things that we give the government of Vietnam resources. And that's it. That's all he authorized. When you read that, if you're a war planner, you know that the only thing you can do is to help the South Vietnamese with their own programs there, give them more helicopters, do whatever. Now, what happens is after Kennedy dies, this is what it looks like, because Bundy's got to go all around Washington and show everybody a new NSAM after Kennedy's dead. And you see paragraph 7 there. You see those two lines through it. It's not a happy to glads like this kind of stuff. That whole paragraph is struck with 2 big lines. And I said, McGeorge, who told you to do that? And he said, LBJ told him to do that. And so when then you look at the new one, you see it's reworded so that a war planner can do whatever he wants. That's
the new paragraph that was put in by the military. That was given to Bundy by the military.
Well, Bundy said he was told by LBJ to do it. I don't know who told LBJ to do it, but that's what Bundy told me. LBJ was his boss now.
No, but I mean the actual wording of that last paragraph. Was that all Bundy, or was that at the direction of somebody in the military?
Are you talking about the first or second version of 273?
I'm talking about the second version when it's crossed out and then the other paragraph is put in.
We don't have I can't give you a document that says who told Johnson, but Johnson's the one who told Bundy to do it.
Right.
While they're still laying in the coffin in the rotunda.
Right.
By the way.
Right.
Okay. So you can see the difference when you take this in the paragraph 7, the new paragraph 7, which I have on page 454. It just says planning. This is paragraph 7 now. It doesn't just say South Vietnamese forces. It says planning should include different levels of possible increased activity. And in such instance, there should be estimates of factors of resulting damage to North Vietnam, possible North Vietnamese retaliation. But there's nothing about just giving resources to South Vietnam anymore. If you're a war planner and you look at this, you can do what you want. And that was done after Kennedy died, like the next day. Anyway, that's where I think Bundy was a hawk. There's no doubt about that. I talked to him, I've read his books, but he was loyal. And he thought that if he put that in there the way it was initially with respect to action in North Vietnam, there should be detailed plans for development of additional government Vietnam resources. That is something that Kennedy might have signed.
So additional resources for South Vietnam, that part?
Yeah, that's it. Nothing else.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Because it points to, I think, a major misconception. I've heard of that whole line of argument over the November 21st conferences. And, it dawns on me now, and not that I was set in my thinking, that you know, that they didn't know the assassination necessarily was coming the next day, and were, you know, acting according to the new boss, you know. So it may mean, in fact, that what John is just saying, unless I'm missing a piece, but
But how
it
could there be a
certainly
new
may-
boss without the assassination?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. There can't be.
There can't be a new boss without the assassination.
Yeah.
Right, but nobody knew it was coming the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. My
The
research is
assassins, they knew it was coming the next day.
yeah.
But somebody had to put that paragraph, that new paragraph. This is what I'm talking about. Somebody had that together. You're not talking about that was written
Yes.
in the next day. That was written beforehand and then was added in by Bundy the next day. So that plan was already.
Bundy wrote the first one and the second one. And the second one was written after Johnson struck paragraph 7. I implore you to, instead of talking to me anymore about this, to please go to JFK in Vietnam. It's my second edition. I put a lot of work into this, and look at it. Just look at it very carefully. NSAM 263 and 273. And then you know, you have to read it. I meet lots of people. I don't meet very many people who've actually read this.
Okay.
I'm asking about that. Why don't you? And then Jim Diogenio, I used to sit with him in out in California, and he never read the second thing. And I said, Jim, I'm going to hold you to it. And so he didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden, you know what he did? He read it. And Paul, you know what his what he did? I thought it was just obsequious. It was so saying everything I said was right in here. And so he finally read the book, and it changed him dramatically. You can ask Jim about it if you want.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Are you thinking about selling your house? Well, Bob Connors, a realtor at Christian Saunders Real Estate, says, I can't sell your house, but I sure as heck can market it and get it from sell to sold. Call Bob today for great marketing and to get a ton of eyeballs on your house. Are you in the market to buy a home? Not sure where to start? If it looks like something you shouldn't buy, Bob's going to tell you that. Think you can't buy a house or have no idea where to start? Been there, done that. Bob will get you going in the right direction. You can reach Bob at 570-614-3624 or 570-335-9000. And you can find Bob on Facebook at Bob Connors-Realtor. Whether you call Bob or not, please remember, stay awesome, all you awesome humans, and be kind to each other. Bob Connors, the realest real estater. And thanks to Bob Connors and Christian Saunders Real Estate for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
Okay. Hey, guys, for the sake of timing, should we go on?
Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, guys, that's super interesting. We'll go. I'm going to share screen again, and I'm going to cover a couple of points. So let's get to. Okay. So look, as you can see, we measured what people thought the motives were to kill JFK. We see that there's an awful lot of different motives. that perhaps they do fall under an umbrella, of this guy is not good for national security, and he goes against the wishes and the policies of the keepers of the gate for national security in the U.S. So the next question was more along the lines, well, let me read it, okay? The following entities were sufficiently motivated before November 22nd, 1963 to participate. Decisions, strategy, finance, leading, managing, executing in a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. Now, look, you'll see again, right? Our famous bars here: disagree, blue, somewhat disagree, red, mostly agree, yellow, and then strongly agree. So we look at the mafia. Well, yeah, okay. They had motive. The Joint Chiefs of Staff had motive, okay? Powerful U.S. business interests had motive. Lyndon Johnson and his political circle. Those who had not that type of motive were the Russians and the Castro forces. Then you keep going, you have extreme right-wingers, anti-Castro Cuban exiles. Look at rogue CIA officers, the FBI, U.S. oil barons. Okay, so the highest here is rogue CIA officers. Now, I got criticized, or we got criticized for that, because some people said, well, why did you not include the CIA as an organization? So I'm going to go to the following survey. Give me a second, because we decided to adjust that question. And you'll see how the next question kind of dovetails or ties into this one here. So just give me a second. Share screen. Okay. Just want to make sure I have this. Do you see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let me go to that question right now. Okay, so we see a whole bunch of people had motive. Now we rephrase the question slightly. We said, which group that was motivated? Okay, we saw many were motivated to assassinate JFK was the most significant for ensuring that the plot would go into effect. Now look at the answers. 30.3% rogue CIA agents, 23.4% Joint Chiefs of Staff, 20% the CIA, because we hadn't included the CIA the first time. So we said, let's include it this time. Okay, so hold your thought on that. I'm going to go to another one because this touched motive also. We talked about Oswald. We asked, Oswald, out of 147 responses, 74.1% said he liked Kennedy. Okay. 2.7% said he disliked Kennedy. 23% did not know. Okay. I thought I'd bring this in as an added bit of information. Now, finally, before we open up the chat, I discussed this with Larry Hancock and Jim DiEugenio, and they both said, Paul, if you had put in maybe the military-industrial complex, or what Garrison called the Cold War establishment, I probably would have gone that way. But in the case of Jim, he says, so I probably, given the questions I was asked, answered the Joint Chiefs of Staff. John, you and I have had discussions on, who calls a coup in a country, intelligence versus military versus. So I'll open again, John, with you on this is let's focus on who, we know a lot of people had motive to kill JFK, but, who was the most significant in ensuring that the plot would go into effect.
Paul, before we go to John, can I just ask a question real quick? Just
Sure.
the survey. Were you, why were you resistant to put names in there rather than just names of organizations or groups of people? Why didn't you list individuals?
Because we decided we wanted to focus on motive and who had the motive and this and that. And the who survey is the next one going up.
Okay, gotcha.
So you said we started with the why.
Yep.
Then we went into the when. I hope we can discuss the when a little bit, after we get through this question. The most recent survey on is the how. We're not discussing the how. Okay, it'll be a future discussion. And we're preparing the survey on the who.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So I'm ahead of you.
Oh, you're way ahead of me. John, go ahead.
Put the chart back up, please. The last chart you had, put it up for us, and I'll talk. Okay.
Let me see if I can get it. This one here?
Yes. Now, in my view, the most significant is the Joint Chiefs. They had the means to do it and the motive to do it. The thing that stands out the most to me is the Russians and the Castro forces didn't have any motive, and that was at the highest level. The public was told that Oswald was a lone nut, but at the top secret level, and believe it, General Odom showed me the stuff that it was secret in the NSA, and it was the same thing. They said that it was that he was working under Castro and the KGB, and that was what was at the secret level and still is. That is not something you see. What you see is, something else entirely about them. That this was part of what happened. But guess what? All the people you interviewed, none of them seem to think that Russia or Castro had anything to do with it. I believe they're right.
I agree.
So excuse me, John, that you're saying that even up to the assassination, during the investigation, after the Warren Carib mission, published their report, in their view, they are propagating the idea, or they continue to stand by the idea that the Russians or the Cubans were behind Oswald killing Kennedy.
At the secret level, yes.
Okay.
We have the documents.
I would love to see those, by the way. I would love to.
Unfortunately, the one that Odom showed me, you can't see.
Okay.
That's still there, but he told me in no uncertain terms, this is what we think happened based upon what the reporting. Now, Odom didn't know anything about how that happened. That was just, he wanted to know, like everybody wants to know. He was the director of NSA. People want to know about aliens, right? And if they get way up there, the president gets say, "What about the aliens?" Anyway, everybody wanted to know who killed Kennedy and what the motive was, and that's what it was at the secret level.
Okay, that's super interesting. Greg, you want to?
Couple things. So on the secret level that John's talking about there, I still have a tendency to think that was manufactured in order to prevent the public having an outcry for some type of retaliation. I think the people at the top had to. Like Earl Warren got browbeat into being on his own commission by LBJ to stop World War III, kind of a thing. So if that's kind of what John's alluding to, is that type of mentality at the top for those reasons, I kind of do see that. I agree also with John 100% except I wouldn't use the same words that you guys had. No criticism. I know you guys are doing the best you can. I don't mean it that way. I wouldn't really say Joint Chiefs of Staff, but I definitely would say military, right? I don't want to just pin it down to those four guys, or, you know what I mean, the people on the Joint Chiefs, but I definitely would say military in that spot. Now, it could reach up to there. I'm not saying that it didn't or it wouldn't, but I would, for me, feel more comfortable just saying military as being the main player in it, because there's too much. There is a military ambush signature to the whole thing, just even operationally it is.
Right.
And then you have the cover up was so thorough and so early put on. So yeah, I have trouble with okay. So I don't like to theorize about stuff, and I don't like speculating too much. We don't have too much of a choice a lot of times. I remember when Johnny Carson had Jim Garrison on, right? And he asked Jim Garrison a question, and Garrison gives him an answer, and Carson basically browbeats him and says, "Well, that's just speculation, isn't it?" You know. And Garrison goes, "Well, Johnny, you asked me the question." He goes, "You know, your government's lying to you. So what do you want me to tell you? What kind of a question, you know?" So I have, you know, a couple of thoughts. I'm not going to bring them up here because I won't have enough time to really flesh it out. Yeah, let me just leave it there because it'll be too confusing if I try to start.
Well, before we just go on, I just want to show you three charts real quick, John and Greg, and everyone anyway. Those who sanctioned the removal of Kennedy expected the blame to fall on Castro. 70.5% say yes, 29.5% say no. Those who planned the hit expected the blame to fall on Castro. 73.6% thought so. And those on the ground in Dallas for the hit expected the same thing, you know, 66%, 34%. So I think a lot of people were caught off guard, you know, if we think these numbers are close to the truth, by the fact that they went the lone nut route.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, this is afterwards, many years afterwards. If you go back to the day afterwards,
Right.
It's a completely different scene. It's what people believed.
That would be my question, John. You know, just bringing it to something that, you know, within my lifetime, when 9/11 happened, there was rampant speculation as to who it was. And I think we were probably all dead on, if not pretty close. When this happened, you know, that's my question, is what was the speculation before? And there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of time in between, but, you know, in that time in between, what was the noise between, you know, for people?
Bill, I'll let John answer. I just want to say something quick on that, because I did an article on that, and an awful lot of the CIA men-friendly media, I'm thinking of a guy like Hal Hendricks and people like Ed Butler. What they were doing at that time is they were sending messages to Washington and the FBI and the press saying that Oswald was in cahoots. You know, they were really playing up the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. They were really, playing up these rumors of who he may have met in Mexico City. David Atlee Phillips was making false flags all over the place with claims that Oswald was seen in Mexico City with Cuban agents. So I know that at first was, you seem to have two opposing forces here. Among the plotters, some were fully intent on blaming Castro. And then, you get the FBI pretty damn quickly saying, no, we see no hints of a conspiracy. So there seem to be competing forces. That's what I'll say. But John, if you want to go.
Hoover never made any mistakes. And so he couldn't have, the secret. Yeah, Hoover never missed anything. And that's why the FBI's position at the highest level doesn't make any sense anyway. But, what you just said is true. That information started to leak out all over the place. It's just that you don't have what Odom showed me in, with all the classifications and everything else about it, which is what was said at the secret level. It was so difficult for the Kennedy family. They sent Walton, I guess was his name. They sent their emissaries over there to say, we did not do this. And the people in Moscow, I said, of course, we know we didn't do it. And they didn't do anything with their forces they didn't move stuff around. They did nothing. Okay, so if they had actually been behind it and expected war, they probably would have had another, overhead would have shown different things. So yeah, I think that things now, a lot of people that are conversant in the Kennedy assassination don't buy that anymore. That Castro and the KGB were in on Oswald.
Mm-hmm. Could I mention something?
Sure.
And I'm going to go back to 273 just in reference to what we were just talking about in respect to the immediate aftermath of the assassination, right? I just find it interesting that in the NSM, in the 273 that we're all familiar with, the fourth paragraph to me always strikes me interesting. I want to set up a context first. So we know that the Honolulu conference, what it was supposed to be discussing, we know that it was a top secret environment. So we know the people there were not supposed to be discussing it outside of the setting, right? We also know that the cabinet was on a plane, the State Department, on Dean Rusk's, the Air Force One, and they were overseas on the way to Japan, right? For a economic conference. And they got news of the assassination while they were on the plane. And the document, the draft of NSAM 273 was circulated on that plane, among other places in the government, but on that plane. And this is what I find fascinating about 4. Now, again, keep in mind, nobody on the plane has any idea of what was talked about at the conference because they weren't at the conference. They're in the air. It is of the highest importance that the United States government avoid either the appearance, and they think JFK is alive at this point, by the way. Let me take that back. I can't prove that. So this is either right before they find out he's dead or right before they find out he's dead. I'm not sure which. I haven't been able to get clarity on that, but I'm still trying to. It is significant, but not huge. It is of the highest importance that the United States government avoid either the appearance or the reality of public recrimination from one part of it against another. About what? About what they just discussed in Honolulu? How the public appearance of what are you talking about here? Okay. And the president expects that all senior officers of the government will take energetic steps to ensure that they and their subordinates go out of their way to maintain and to defend the unity of the United States government, both here and in the field. Now, this document was signed the night before. So they couldn't have been talking about in response to the assassination because it hadn't happened yet.
Right.
It had to be in response to, but they had to be talking about the assassination because it's the only thing that makes sense. Because they can't be talking about Vietnam policy. The people that this got given to have no idea what the policy is yet. It hasn't even been released. It's not even 24 hours old. The president hasn't even gotten it yet. So I just always found that it's like that's an instruction, an operational instruction in the middle of the coup. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to find out that many of these staff members and cabinet members that were on this aircraft and others in government who had gotten this directive, let's assume for a second that they got it before they got word of the assassination. Just don't know, but let's just say they got it beforehand. Now it takes on a real specific significance because they think it's coming from the JFK White House, not the LBJ White House. It's coming from the JFK White House. But what's it referencing? See, what is it referencing? Well, if we say it's referencing the assassination, now it kind of makes sense because all of a sudden they want everybody to get on board, right? The Russians, using the Castro people, killed Kennedy, and it'll be World War III if we let anybody know. So don't criticize this conclusion. No blaming each other for what happened. Don't blame the Secret Service for not doing their job. Don't blame the FBI for falling asleep at the wheel. Don't blame, the 112th Military Intelligence Group for not showing up. None of that. We know who did it. It's a lone nut. And yeah, he was a Marxist, but he had nothing to do with Khrushchev. End of story. So that's the other part of that document that I've always found at least mentionable, because it has nothing to do with anything else. When you read that, it's like, it doesn't mention Vietnam. It doesn't mention what they were supposed to be talking about, which was what? The withdrawal from Vietnam in early, it doesn't even, it has nothing to do with Vietnam. I mean, it's not, it's kind of just sits there. So I wouldn't be surprised that if in the halls of Washington, you know, elites, or for lack of a better way of saying it, within the government, that they were partially compelled to follow this directive. You know, because in that big mess of things, right, when you get this document while you're on a plane and then you find out that the president's just been shot, there's a, you know what I mean? There's an emotional response to that. And a lot of stuff gets, from a psychology standpoint, gets mushed together. You know, it gets very mushed together in that moment. And one thing gets attached to something else very quickly.
Right.
You know, thanks for letting me throw that in.
Great. Hey.
DK's Corner, located on 802 East Lackawanna Avenue in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. Visit DK's Corner for hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, and delicious breakfast, including breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos. And take it from me, the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. Check out DK's Corner, Oliphant's little hoagie shop. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. That's DK's Corner in Oliphant, Pennsylvania. And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, you know, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh my, they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you know, you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, you know, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. I mean, again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
Well, start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
Great. Hey, Sean, do I have time for touching on one other?
Yeah,
subject?
one more. But could I add something, Professor, on something about the
Of
said
course.
about the, you know, in that survey it says rogue CIA agents. And I'm thinking that we know that when Kennedy removes Dulles and he puts McCone in there, that I think we all agree that McCone had no knowledge of what was going on here. But the thing is, couldn't you say, like, right from the beginning, like, even from its inception, and certainly under Allen Dulles, the CIA is like a rogue outfit to begin with. They're doing things, assassinations, coup d'états, operations like MK Ultra and Operation Chaos. And the thing is, if like Richard Helms is the director in 63 when this assassination takes place, instead of when he became director in 65 or whatever, do we even talk about Rogue at that
Well,
point? You know what I'm saying?
Sean, if I can maybe mention something there, because we had an interesting
Sure.
discussion about that. The word rogue is really abstract. What does rogue mean? Does it mean you're not, like, technically,
Not
Dulles,
institutional.
pardon?
It means not the institution.
That's
Yeah,
right,
so-
not the
If the
institution.
director of the CIA is for it, it's institutional.
Right.
I agree, but here's the idea here, right? Is that Dulles, Cabell, and Bissell are no longer part of the CIA
Right.
officially, right? They're
Sure.
fired. You have William Harvey, who's been exiled to Rome.
Rome, yeah.
Okay, so he can be within the CIA anyway, but rogue. You know what I mean? So could David Atlee Phillips. And I guess that when you get into a lot of the covert stuff, there's probably some rogue stuff going on. So are we talking about people who are outcasts within the CIA, who are, yesterday's people, or whatever? So I agree with John, by the way. I don't think that as an institution, the respondents think that the CIA was certainly. That's why I think they have their eyes on people like Dulles, Harvey, Phillips, and that gang when they're thinking rogue. But it is an abstract term, right? It's
Right.
so yeah, I agree with you, John, that the institution it would have been if McCone sanctioned it, or so there. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah,
but
no, that's fair enough.
And
Fair
that's
enough.
why I asked my question, Paul, about the names, was because when I saw that, Rogue CIA, I mean, that screamed Allen Dulles to me. So that's why I thought if I were answering, that's
if you guys knew how hard it is to answer those questions sometimes, you should see the thinking that goes into preparing the question.
I
It
can
is
imagine.
so,
Yeah.
and the order, like there's got to be a build up to this. You can't go into a questionnaire, and you have to be careful how we're going to talk about witting participation, unwitting participation. And to what degree someone is a person of interest. So just thinking of how to ask the question, boy, do we spend time on that. I think that so far, the how really scared us. What do you mean how? Like, did somebody use a silencer? Anyway, but we came up with a lot of interesting ways, I think, of asking the questions, and we're still working on the hoop. But right now, I'll give you a hint. We've got a long list of names: Secret Service, Dallas Police Department, 488, Mafia, Rogue CIA, CIA. We have all these people that we put on a list, and it's a long list of about 90 names. Now, we don't know that, all 90 names were involved, but we're trying to figure out what the community feels about that. But I'm going too far ahead. You guys probably are seeing another show down the road.
Okay.
around
Yeah.
that. Look, guys, I think I would like to get people to weigh in on the when, and I'll only just ask one question on the
Okay.
when. The when would be, okay, there was disappointment going on from 61 all the way to his assassination on all his policies. But we asked the question, and we discussed the question with two experts so far. The question was three, actually, but it was when, we had three questions that were lined up, and, I can share screen on that if you want. Yeah, I'll do that. Here we go. Okay, so the question was, when did those at the top of the hierarchy, okay, behind Kennedy's assassination, come to a consensus that he needed to be removed as president? Come to a consensus, right? So you can say there was a buildup. You might say, well, Laos was part of the buildup, and the failed Bay of Pigs, and then the missile crisis, and so on and so forth. But when did the people say, hey, wait a minute, he's got to go, right? So look, 18%, look how close it is, right? 18% say that it was in and around the missile crisis. 18%, the same number, says when it became clear he did not want to engage the U.S. in a war with Vietnam. 16%, 17% after the failed Bay of Pigs. 15.3% when he began seeking detente with Russia. Now I'll go on a little bit because the logistical planning, when did that start? Okay, so 33% early 1963. 20% in and around the missile crisis, which is near the end, right, of 62. Right after the failed Bay of Pigs, summer of 63. Then attempts to assassinate JFK. People mostly believe that the attempts, that there wasn't just one attempt, but they started during the months leading up to the assassination. I won't go into all the details on that, but now, let me throw in what two of our guests, experts, said. I'm referring to Jim and Larry. When we discussed this issue, they said that after the missile crisis and by the end of early 1963, there's plenty of documentation to show that Kennedy in Washington was hated by all, just about. Not, I mean, I don't want to say 100%, but everybody. I'm not talking about the general population, but and that was sort of what came out of their discussion. But I'm really interested to hear from John and everybody and Greg on this. Do you have an idea on the timeline when the ideas gelled? Like you can start hating someone early, but it requires a bit of communication, right, and talking and coming up with a group think before you.
I can do it real quick, so I don't take up a lot of time.
Go ahead, John.
There's motive, means, and opportunity. I think the motive is where we think it began through 61 and grew. But I agree that it by January or so of 1963, but maybe December 62, definitely there are means. That's when, when Oswald puts the placard around his neck and goes to Castro, and a lot of things. The parade route was being decided at that point. But opportunity is not here. When did they? What you're asking here is, when did they just come to a consensus that he'd have to be removed? And so that's different than, okay, here's the opportunity to get him, which I think was in the summer and into the fall. But I think I would go along with, it was about in between the end of 62 and early 63.
Right.
I'd have to go along with that as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Sean, and do you have an opinion on when you thought? Did you know? Or
no, I'd agree. I'd agree with that when everything started to come together. I'd agree with Greg and John.
Okay. Bill, do you
sorry.
Does that make sense to you too? Or
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the realization that he wasn't going to go into Vietnam was the final nail in the coffin. I think everything kind of leading up to that, and then that was it.
I think that's a really insightful comment there, because it was like the final nail in the coffin. It was like proof positive that there was no way to turn him.
Right.
Right.
And that he was going to do damage at this point, literal damage to what they were attempting to do. The domination of Southeast Asia, the halting of the non-existent fictitious domino effect, that whole mentality. I'm very much anti-communist, but there was a time, back then, as you all know, that there was people that were rabidly anti-communist. It would be like being, afraid of, well, using the word rabid, a rabid dog, but now you see rabid dogs every time you see a dog practically. And I think we had quite a few people in the military intelligence world that kind of fell into that, into that category. But I think it's interesting. I had several conversations with Hemming about this because of his interaction with the people in Interpen, and their business, as you know, was, penetrating other continents and toppling governments and doing all kinds of nefarious activities. And he said that in their, and he's not talking about his immediate group, he's talking about in that, we talk about rogue people, right? This large group and several groups of rogue people. The Cuban Missile Crisis alarmed them tremendously, just tremendously, even to the point where it got to James Jesus Angleton, and Angleton talked to Hemming specifically about the danger of Kennedy, that we're gonna end up in a third world war, or in a nuclear exchange under this guy, etc. So I think that it's interesting. The delay between the Cuban Missile Crisis and the assassination is what I think implicates Vietnam as being the point that it just went, okay, we're doing it now. That's it. We have no time to wait. And it's interesting, that Ed Lansdale retired from the CIA at midnight on November 1st or 2nd, literally minutes before or after the Diem coup took place. It's
Right.
kind of an interesting timing, I thought that's an aside. I just found
We were talking to John before the podcast started about Lansdale.
Yeah. Interesting
And
character.
a question I did not bring up, by the way, is people, when they were asked, did the coup plotters see themselves as patriotic, and an overwhelming majority of the people say, oh yeah, they thought themselves as being like 9-1,
Yeah.
And yet still a large number say they were self-serving too, so it's an interesting
You have to understand that I get it with my students all the time, because they were doing crazy things, injecting women in really good university hospitals with all kinds of radium and different things like that. And you tell students today about what we were doing back then, and they say, what? Because you would have to have lived back then when it was binary. It was us or them. Somebody's got to die. We cannot live together. And Kennedy, that's why he was pleading. We can all breathe the same air and all that, but no, that's not the way it looked. Everybody thought, in the military anyway, most of them did, that it's either us or them.
Yeah.
So they did stuff that you would never contemplate doing today.
Can I throw a question out to the panel? Why not wait until the election and just fix the election? Or was it, this guy can't be in office 1 second longer?
My opinion is he was so popular. I think they couldn't leave it to chance that he might get reelected anyway.
But why wouldn't they just fix the election though? They did it in other countries. The CIA did it all over the world.
It may have been I think they were afraid of a landslide. I mean, to be honest with you, you know what I mean? Because the hardest election to fix is a landslide.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Oh yeah. I think they were afraid of a Kennedy dynasty, right?
Then you got Bobby after that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't have any more questions, Sean. So why don't you take over from here? And Bill, I just want to again thank Sean, Bill, John, and Greg. I just felt like I was at the movies watching, an Oscar. And it's not because you guys are acting, but what a fun episode. And, great insights. I will go and now read JFK in Vietnam, and I will also read, Greg, more of your articles, that's for sure. Not that I haven't read any of your material or have heard you before, I have, but that's, I promise I will do that. I'd like to also tell your audience once again that if they want to get insights from those surveys, go on jfkchokeholds.com, click on media, and you'll see 3 different entries for the 3 different surveys. There will be a 4th one also, and we'll stay tuned on that. And I hope that we have more discussions going forward about what the heck happened, rather than the Zapruder film. Okay,
Right.
to me, it's such a farce. I think we get bogged down into
Sure.
proving there was a conspiracy, and there are great minds that do that. And I'm not saying it's bad to do that, but we're beyond that point, right? It's what happened, and that's always been my goal, is to feel like it's the biggest whodunit of the last century. Well, tell us what happened, or let's find out what happened. So thank you so much, guys, and Sean, it's all yours.
Well, I just want to say thanks. This was fantastic. And I just want to leave it open to end this with John and Greg. If you guys just want to say something to close it out, John, you could start.
Thanks for inviting me.
Definitely. Thank you. It's a great conversation.
And
Greg, any closing?
thanks for inviting me as well. For those who aren't aware, my articles and website are assassinationofjfk.net. And then I do want to do one quick thing. I want to plug David Mantik and Jerome Corsi's latest book, The Final Analysis. It's probably been plugged before here, but I think it's a must read for serious people interested in this. I think that, speaking of the Zapruder film, which that book is not about, I think that the more we can apply science to these issues, the more, especially the very controversial issues, the better. And
Right.
I think David has done a great job of applying physics and medicine and his forensic knowledge to the case and to the evidence. And I think he outlined it extremely well in that book. So I encourage everybody to really take a look at it, because a lot of what we have to do is we have to go on documents. We have to go on a lot of inference, for lack of a better word, where when you can actually go and make physical measurements of things, that's, and get it replicated, it's very scientific at that point. So I think it's really good. He invites people at the end of that book, by the way, to visit the archives, because you can replicate, or attempt at least to replicate, the, results that he had. And either debunk it if you can, or say, yes, he got this right. And I think it's really important, because it starts to put to rest the most fundamental question, which I'm glad you guys already have, that we know one thing for certain in this: Lee Harvey Oswald did not do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John, I want to plug John's books too, because I'll tell you, the ones I have read are the ones that have, delved into areas, what they did, John and people of his ilk, in terms of busting cryptonyms. Okay, but figuring out a cryptonym, and I was fascinated by what they did with the Rodriguez family, and that's an amazing story. And when you look at, just quickly, an Oswald who meets a Rodriguez who works for a translation company that he's running, and says, hey, I'd like to, and this guy points the way to Carlos Bringuier. And that guy's brother is a top CIA guy out of JM Wave. Okay, that guy's brother, and he has his story to tell in this whole thing. Well, you can thank people like John for having busted the cryptonyms to make that picture. It's amazing. So I wanted to plug John's work too there, because nobody does that type of work.
And I'll just mention that all of these books are on our bookshop. For our listeners, we always have the link on there, and we'll put direct links to those books, but they're all on our bookshop to purchase. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Amazon, of course. All the books
as well. Sure.
Well, one of these days I will finish. I've started 5 different times and I just can't seem to get done, but maybe I will. Well, thank you for having me. I really
All right,
appreciate
thank
it.
you,
And I
guys.
enjoyed this.
Yeah, we thank you guys for coming on. This has been fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everybody.
All
Take
right.
care, guys.